Waiting the longest minute ever.
Yeah.
we got like a minute. Exactly.
It's an eternity in production world. Are you doing an intro or should I just go like right?
No, just right. Well, we'll just go from this. Like, all, as soon as I fly this thing off,
yeah.
You can just start.
Cool. Sounds good. Hey, good afternoon. My name is Tim, and I'm an employee of the City and County of Denver. I'm the live stream producer, mainly doing city council meetings, video editing, news programs, things like that. But I graduated in 2010 for broadcast design and production, and I've been also shooting still photography for over 10 years now. Have probably tens of thousands of pictures I've shot. So today we're going to do an intro to photography course, kind of get people away from the simple point and shoot into the more technical aspects of a more advanced camera to get some better pictures and see what you can do with it. And yeah, so this is going to be just a very super high level course. It's not going to be camera specific. So any camera you get, you're going to be able to kind of translate this to a Canon, a Sony, Nikon, whatever you want to do. And it's really, it's going to be practice outside of this. This will be kind of your baseline. This is where you're going to start. And the only way you're going to get good and learn this is to shoot a lot of pictures, just like I did and still am doing. So we'll jump right into it. And the first part will be just various types of cameras. And nowadays, the most popular one is going to be your phone. And phones are, they're good because they're in your pocket. You always have them. And they're always going to be around. They're good because they're accessible. They shoot pretty good pictures if you don't look too closely. They're full auto, which means you don't really have control over settings generally. Some phones are getting it to be a bit more manual, but it's still kind of tough to work with compared to a camera like a DSLR mirrorless Sony camera. Yeah, they're very heavily edited. Again, once you kind of start taking more pictures, you can see how edited they are compared to a picture you get off a higher quality camera. But they're easy, they're fast, they're accessible. And everyone's got them now. Another kind of camera, which you've probably seen maybe 10, 15 years ago, is a point and shoot. The little tiny Kodak, something you point at someone and take a picture. And that's it. Again, kind of same as the phone, super easy to use, very accessible. But you can't change lenses, not very advanced features. It's only going to shoot JPEG compared to a big Sony camera or another mirrorless. It's going to shoot a thing called RAW, which we'll get into in a few minutes here. But they're easy to use and expensive, and the picture quality is fine if you just want to put it up on Facebook, social media, something super easy, send it out to family, totally fine. But again, most of the class, let me see if I can lift it up here, is going to be focused on a camera like this, a DSLR, or they don't really sell DSLRs anymore. It's called a mirrorless camera. It's going to be mostly focused on this, but some of the other stuff we're going to get to later in the course is going to translate into phone point and shoot, mainly the composition and how to really take a good picture. So these are good. They have interchangeable lenses. So this lens will come off. I could put this one on for different, not effects, but different lengths, which we'll get into again a little bit later. They have very advanced settings, or they could, for autofocus, exposure. They have things you could plug in. You have a screen like I do, extra batteries, just tons of customization to really get what you want. And again, once you're out of this course, you're going to be able to use that camera to get what you want through all these settings, shutter speed, exposure, and all that, again, which we're all going to get into. So there's a phrase called date the body and marry the lens. So the body of the camera, which is the unit that actually takes the pictures, for most professional photographers, you're probably going to get 5 to 7 years out of it. For your lenses, if you take good care of it, you're going to get this forever. Your lens is always good. If it's good lens to start, it's going to be a good lens forever. So really, you want to spend your money on a good lens compared to a good body. Bodies will come and go. Lenses are forever. And yeah, you can just really customize everything. And it will shoot raw photos. So raw photos, again, which we'll get into a little bit later, they're very flat, which means there's not a lot of colors, not a lot of shadow in, but you can bring it in a program called Lightroom or another photo editing program, which we're not going to get into today, but if there's some interest, let me know and we can do a Lightroom workshop too and kind of see how to work your photos with that. So real quick, I'll just pop over and just show a real quick, just 2 pictures of just a quick difference between a phone camera and something that's shot on the mirrorless. So this is a phone camera. And again, when you zoom in, you can you'll start to see a lot of pixelization, a lot of kind of rings around where the mountains meet the sky. It's called haloing, where they're doing kind of the artificial exposure. Compared to something like this, where you get out of a mirrorless camera, we can really customize how the sky looks, the shadows, the sun, the white balance, everything like that, to get really full control over what you want to do. And so now we'll go into kind of the basic camera functions. So basically, at a very high level, all you're going to need to know is what shutter speed is, exposure, and ISO, and how they interact. That is, if you learn those 3, you're going to be able to learn how to take a really good picture, and learning what you want to see, what you want to get, and doing that quickly is really one of the biggest aspects to photography. So let's pop over to the camera. And the first thing we're going to do is shutter speed. And shutter speed is usually measured in seconds. You can kind of see the 1/3 down there. And I will change the shutter speed 1/4 all the way up to, you can see it gets darker, and we'll explain why in a minute. So that's the actual click. When you hear the shutter click, that's the shutter speed. So that's how long it takes to take a picture. So let's say 1/3 of a second. We'll take it real quick. See, that was, you kind of see how quickly the picture goes. But if we go way up to 1/320, and we'll get into all this stuff a little bit later, you could just see how quickly that camera takes a picture. So of course, if you have your sensor open to absorb the light, you're going to get more light. The quicker it does, the darker your picture is going to see. So you can kind of see that in action. 3/20 of a second, very dark, and you go down again to 1/60th, 1/50th. You're going to get brighter and brighter as you go down. So some things to keep in mind with your shutter speed. The slower your shutter speed, you're going to kind of get the motion. You're going to see kind of things warping a little bit, or if you want to take pictures of waterfalls, you're going to kind of see motion smoothed out. But if you want to take a picture of something really fast, you're going to want a fast shutter speed. Something that's, if I'm shooting handheld, I probably won't go past 160 or so. And that's, you know, holding your breath, holding it super tight with feet on the ground, kind of really anchored in. And then once you get up, if you're outside in full daylight, you can get up to 800 or 1,000 with, you know, a 5.6 f-stop, which again, we'll get into a little bit later. So yeah, just really important to know how shutter speed affects your picture and what you want to do with it. So if you're shooting into the sun, you're going to want a high shutter speed. If you're shooting in a dark forest, you're going to want a slow shutter speed with your camera down or even on a tripod. So we can really quickly take a look at some shutter speed examples. So this one was kind of like, I would say like a medium shutter speed, maybe. And you know puppies, they shake really quickly. So probably 1/80th or 1/100th. You can kind of see her face kind of staying steady, but her ears and a little bit of her fur and all the water droplets, you kind of see those little bit of trails. And then this plane, I just happened to be on top of a mountain over Frisco, and the military planes just, with luck, happened to be coming in. And this is, again, how you want to know these settings so you can really get these pictures. So this plane is probably moving, 500 plus miles per hour. So my shutter speed, I'm probably tracking it while it's going. Probably at 500, 1/500th or a little bit more, tracking it as we're going in manual focus. And again, we'll get into focus a little bit later. So really fast shutter speed. Again, someone moving down, skiing down a glacier, pretty quickly. So you don't get any of the motion blur on him. You're going to have a nice sharp image. And with stars, you're going to kind of go the opposite. You want to have a tripod, a nice slow shutter speed. Because if you've been outside at night, you can probably tell this isn't exactly what it looks like. But with that, probably 1-2 second shutter speed closed, it's able to absorb all that starlight that we can't see with our eyes and really get all the detail. But you're going to shake. So even the slightest touch, even if it's a little breeze, you're going to kind of get blurry. So a lot of times you're shooting stars, you have to do 3-4 takes, especially if you don't have the steadiest tripod. And we'll get into water, which is a really good example of shutter speed. This one's really quick. You can kind of see the water drops. It's kind of like a moment frozen in time. You can kind of see everything bouncing. It looks like almost like your naked eye, like how you would see it. And then slowing down a little bit, especially on the water and the waves, you can kind of see the motion getting a little bit smoothed out, but you can still kind of see some ripples and bumps and things like that. So this is probably maybe 1/3 of a second or so, maybe a touch slower. And this is probably a 1 second exposure. So the shutter, it's taking light in for a second, maybe 2 seconds. Especially in the waterfall, you could see everything's very smoothed out. It's taking, again, the average of the motion. So all these little water droplets all together over a second, and you get kind of pictures like this. So that's how shutter speed can affect your picture. And that's, a lot of times that's where I start with shutter speed. Because I'm shooting handheld or tripod, I know how quickly I need to get. And then from there, we will switch to aperture, which is, there's a little eye in the lens, which opens and closes, which lets more light in. So if we go to, camera full screen, so we can see as the aperture gets high, up to f16, it's getting pitch black because the hole's getting smaller and smaller. And then if you shoot, it's called wide open. This one goes to 2.8. Some lenses, more expensive lenses, will go to 1.4. It's going to let more light in. So, easy kind of to remember. The bigger number, the less light. Kind of an inverse operation there. But there's kind of like same with shutter speed. You're going to kind of get some different effects and different almost compromises with how your shutter speed or your aperture affects things. And we can kind of do a real world test. And so what f-stop will affect is your depth of field, which is how much is in focus. And we're going to get into focus in a little bit. But that's kind of the big thing besides light is what f-stop is going to do. So if f2.8, the more wide open you get, you're going to get this very tiny focus plane. So you're going to get a little tiny bit in focus. So you can see here, I have my lens cap right there in focus at f2.8, but everything behind it, this is only an inch behind and it's already out of focus. And so I'm going to, on the fly, get this up to maybe f7, and we can see how that will affect. So again, I'm going to want to lower my shutter speed, let more light in, and then I can go back and keep doing that. And so now that I'm on f6.3, you could kind of see, you could even read the words right there a little bit. So you see it's a lot more in focus with the bigger f-stop I got. So again, I'll drop it down. It's going to get a little overexposed here, but it'll be easier to see. So you see the lens is way out of focus. The back one up to 6, it's a lot more in focus. So that's the big thing to remember with f-stop is light and focus. And you're going to want to focus, again, we'll get into focus on your focal plane or in your focal point, which is what you want people to look at during your picture. So if I, do not want people to look at this cap, I want them to look at the lens, I will adjust my focus just a touch to get there. And typically, and this will take some research depending on what lens you're using, but different lenses are going to have the sharpest point. I think I have a Tamron, so around 8 and 9 for this particular lens, you're going to get the sharpest image. So every lens is going to be different. Definitely worth doing a quick search to see kind of where that sweet spot is going to live. So once I have my shutter speed and my f-stop, the next thing we're going to need to do is ISO, which you could kind of see this number here. And that is the sensitivity to light. So if I'm, again, this is where practice is going to come in. If I'm shooting handheld, I know I'm going to want to be, we'll call it 1/160th. And then if I want a kind of a bigger depth of field, but not too big, I'll park it on f6. And I'm still way dark. So the last thing to do is to work outside of shining a light on it, which sometimes you can, sometimes you can't, is your ISO. And again, every camera, you would think the lower you get, the better it's going to look, but that's not necessarily true for Sony's. I believe the less grain, which is kind of how crackly the image looks, is going to be around 200. So the higher you get, whoop, went way past that, the more grain you're going to get. It's going to kind of look a little fuzzy almost, and I'll have some pictures of that. So that's the last thing I always do. You want to keep the ISO as low as you can once you get, your other things kind of dialed in. So we could switch over, take a look at some pictures real quick, some examples. So these are some depth of field. So for this picture, I want to be in f6 because everything in the background didn't really matter. All you want, again, is your focal point, which is the dog's face. And you always want to focus on the eyes and get that in. And again, we'll get to focus in a minute, but so that's why I kind of chose that f-stop, is nothing in the background really mattered. Same with this. So the focal point is this hand gripping the rock. And I didn't want anything else to be kind of a distraction. So that rock in the front and the rock kind of behind the rope would be a little more distracting. Your eyes kind of want to be drawn to that hand. And so if you shoot probably f6, f4, something like that, you're going to kind of get that a lot more dialed in compared to something like this, where you got a little bit of a wider picture. So you don't want just her shoulder in focus or just her eyes. You kind of want her whole body in focus. So you're going to eye shot this a little bit more open, or a little bit more close, at f7.1, something like that, just to get a little bit wider depth of field, but you could still see the rocks in front are a touch out of focus, which is totally okay. And then this is kind of the exact opposite. This is an example of everything's in focus. You're looking probably 60 miles down the mountains up to 10 feet at my feet. And again, we'll get into how to focus this in a little bit in the focus, but this is going to be probably 10, 12, maybe even 14, with a pretty quick shutter speed and probably a little bit of ISO in there just to kind of get that exposure up. All right, and we'll hop into lower thirds or real thirds in a minute. But next we're going to get into focus. So focus is another really big part of how you're going to get a good picture. And again, you want to focus on your focal point, which makes sense, which is what you want to take the picture of. And focus is determined by how far something is from your lens. And using your focus ring, you change that. So you see down there, there's the mountains, which is going to be farther away, which is all the way in that door, compared to that person. If you go down, 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 it gets a little more in focus. So your focus will change based on the distance from the camera. So this is in focus now, pushes back, it's out of focus, and I find it again right to where the focus point is. And a lot of mirrorless cameras are going to have what's called a focus zebra. You could change it to whatever color you want. Mine are red. You can't see it on this screen, but they're on. And it's kind of like a little shortcut. It's going to tell you what's in focus and how big it is. So if I'm in 2.8 like I am now, it's very tiny. But if I'm at 14, it's going to be pretty big. So focus zebras are definitely a big help. I use them all the time. No shame in getting help where you need it. So, and again, the higher f-stop, you're going to get that bigger focal plane. So if you have kind of layers of people or layers of things, you're going to want to bring that up a little bit, again, just to get that nice depth of field. So you could do manual focus or autofocus. Right now I have this set in manual focus, which is exactly what it sounds like. I can choose exactly where to focus. And if something's sitting still, I can be comfortable knowing it's there. And also the further away you get, the less sensitive your focus is going to be. So since this lens cap is 3 inches from my camera, the focus is going to be very sensitive. So let me see if I get it without getting the shadow. So if I move it, touch back, it's out. And that's only an inch or so away. But if I go down to that doorway, which is probably those little leaves on the top, are maybe 15, 20 feet away. So I can move the camera, again, those few inches, and it's not really going to kind of go way out of focus. So the further away, you're a little more generous with focus. The closer you are, you really have to make sure you get that dialed in, because you'll notice it being out of focus. A good way to get focus is to zoom in on your subject. And then you can kind of see it's a little too close. Sometimes you get a little too close and your lens can't do it, but we'll try the door here. So zoom all the way in as close as you can. And then get your focus. And then you could zoom back out. Your zoom will not affect your focus, only where your camera is positioned. So zoom in, get your focus. You can zoom back out and do whatever you want to, and whatever you focus on is going to be in focus. So that's a great way to ensure you're in focus, along with the zebras. So yeah, mountains are going to be easy. A bug on a leaf is going to be very, very tough. Some photographers are taking thousands of pictures to nail in their process to get that bug on a leaf or something. Focus can get really very sensitive the bigger lens you get. So if you don't want to mess with manual focus, we'll really focus on 2 kinds of autofocus. Autofocus automatic or autofocus single and autofocus continuous. So autofocus single is going to find your subject. You can press the lens and you can hear it and see it focusing. And now my focus is set and I can take a bunch of pictures and it will. But if I move this, you can see how the focus is not changing because it's taking that single autofocus right there. So if your subject is going to stay still the whole time, autofocus single is the way to go. Compared to autofocus continuous, We could press the button. It's catching this lens cap here, and it's going to track generally. The lower light, it's harder to track, as you could kind of see. I get my arm out of the shadow here. But it will track this lens, so you can, again, I need a little more light, but it will track as you move. So if you have a subject who's kind of bouncing around a little bit, maybe an animal or a dog, definitely you want to use the autofocus continuous to get that focus a little bit better than autofocus single. You can also choose where the autofocus will go. And again, this is kind of something you want to play around with depending on how you're shooting. But wide is just, it's going to take a wide shot of your whole picture. A zone, you can kind of choose where you want your focus to be. So if you frame your shot up and I actually want this lens in focus, you could see that box moving around. I'm going to tell it to go about there. And it's roughly there. Again, it's very dark. So you want a well-exposed subject for autofocus generally. Center is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to take whatever's in the center of the screen and focus it. And again, I'll get into in a few minutes of how sometimes focus can get confused. None of these auto things quite yet, maybe as technology gets bigger, are exactly bulletproof or perfect. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. So yeah, autofocus can miss. Again, low light, it's going to be really tough, especially with people. Fences, if you go through like a chain link fence, it always wants to get the fence instead of whatever subject is behind. So there you would want to probably use manual focus. Mountains and landscape, it's hard for the camera to really know what is kind of being detected. So it might even bounce around your focus, kind of like we were seeing here. It was a little confused. It didn't know where it's going, what's going to be focused on. So it might do that. So you might get one picture that has a mountain in focus, and then one of them is not in focus because your autofocus is not doing great about it. And for things that are moving really quick, again, like that plane, a skier, I do autofocus continuous because it's really hard to move that and switch it back to manual focus. It's really hard to, on the fly, get that exact precision focus. And the better camera you have, the better autofocus you're going to have generally. Sony's are pretty well known, which is this camera, for having really good autofocus. All right, so those are the basics of kind of, how to get your picture. Shutter speed, exposure, ISO, and then focus. So those are the science behind it, like getting the light, making sure you have enough light, and making sure what you want is in focus. Really what separates like a good photographer from someone just taking pictures is going to be composition and framing. And that's how a picture looks, compared to if you're just not thinking about it and just taking a picture, compared to if you're actually thinking about your framing, and thinking about all these things we're going to talk about now. Which for the first one is rule of thirds. And this is the first thing, there we go. They teach you in either still or video is rule of thirds. This is kind of step one for composition. And as you can see, it's just pretty much a tic-tac-toe on the screen. And your eyes are naturally going to be drawn to all those intersections. So you roughly, again, these are guidelines, not rules, which we'll take a look at in a second. You roughly want to frame your subject somewhere along the borders of these intersections of the lines. Your eyes are just naturally going to be drawn there. And, sometimes you want to aim for the top, sometimes for the bottom lines. It all depends, again, which we'll see in a second here. And, a lot of times when you're first starting out, you think you might want to get that face or something right in the center, but that's really not going to give you anything else outside of the picture to look at. So yeah, try and aim for these lines. Some cameras will have a grid you can put up while you're taking pictures so you can actually physically see it. but the more pictures you take, the more you're going to be able to kind of imagine these lines. It's going to be second nature the more pictures you take. So again, not fully complete rules. So her eyes are kind of in the center. And kind of each eye is kind of roughly in the center where those lines intersect, but not fully completely. And we'll get to leading lines in 1 second. And leading lines are what is going to kind of draw your eye through a picture. It's going to help keep it interesting, help give it things to. So for this one in the bottom right, you can kind of see that trail kind of roughly going up and to the right, which is kind of leading your eyes up through the picture. Same with this one. You can kind of see a person kind of in the right on the top third or so. And then you have the snow following you up to the top of the mountain, and as well as that trail. So you have kind of two lines, again, keeping the picture a little bit more interesting than if there were no lines there. You've just got the guy on the other side of the frame with nothing to look at. Same with this. You can kind of see a guy on the left on the ridge, and that's, again, the focal point where is the guy. Hopefully, you kind of go right there to start, and then your eyes are going to kind of go down, follow the ridge line all the way down to the mountain going up. You have the shadows to the left and then the green to the right. So you have the good contrast and just somewhere for your eyes to go. And then, so we'll talk about leading edge. And this is something, again, kind of like the rule of thirds. This will become second nature. Once you realize what this is, you're going to see it everywhere, especially in TV, documentaries, news. And that's just where you're looking and where you're putting your subject. So if your subject is on the left side of the screen, looking to the right side of the screen, you want to give them that room, kind of the opposite of here. So it's kind of like, where are they looking? What are they looking at? So you could see this one, I kind of broke those rules. And I could crop this in Lightroom. That's another class, but you can kind of see him right in the middle. It doesn't look quite as natural, I don't think, as this one, where he's on the right side looking left and you have that room on the left. So you just want to kind of frame your subjects kind of to where they're looking. Again, same, you can kind of see she's looking at something, and of course, every picture you're not going to be able to see exactly what she's looking at, but you just want to make sure you have that leading edge. And again, the more you practice, the more you notice, you're going to be able to get that right away without even thinking about it. But just something to really pay attention the first, few times you're out there with your camera. All right, now we're going to go into lighting. So lighting is very tough. People make whole careers just out of lighting. You don't even have to take a single picture. You can just be a lighting person. So there's two kinds of lights, and it'll make sense, but natural light, which is sun, shadow, moon, and artificial light, which is a light like above me that you can plug in and shine down on someone. So when you're shooting outside, obviously you don't really have full control over when the clouds come in, things like that, but you can take advantage of them, which we'll get to in a second. So the best time to shoot outside is going to be the golden hour, which is right around the time the sun sets, and the blue hour, which is right around the time the sun comes up. Full day sun, great time to be outside, great time to be in the park, out hiking. But for photography, full sunlight is actually not the most ideal. You could kind of see in this one, there's a little bit more depth, a little bit more texture with the sun and the shadows. If you got full sunlight, it's just very flat, and it doesn't give your picture much depth much texture to it. And then there's artificial light, which again, I would recommend if you're just starting out, don't jump right in. I don't think you need to buy $1,000 worth of lights right in the way. First thing, but let me switch my camera real quick. I'm going to pull up a quick video. I'll pull up the video a little bit later, but so there's three lights basically you want to get to, which is the key light, which is your main light, which is kind of shining right above my head. A fill light, which is going to kind of take some of the shadows off into my side of my face. and then a backlight, which you can see behind me, which is that purple. If the backlight's off, you're not going to really see the background. Just gives a little bit more depth. And for lighting, especially for artificial lighting, you want to pay attention to contrast, and that's the difference between the white and the darks. And you can see that with something called a histogram, which is that little graph on the bottom right there. And this is another great way of telling your exposure as well. So contrast, yeah, like it's a separation between the light and the dark. And so on the histogram there, on the left is the white, and on the right is the black. And what you do not want to do is it's called clipping, which is get that all the way to the top. Clipping is a loss of data, which means in editing, if you're clipping in those blacks way back there, you're not going to be able to find any detail. And the whites way up here, also, it's all just going to be lost. Whereas everything in between, you can kind of tweak the settings. So when you're doing lighting, you just want to pay attention to your contrast, make sure nothing's too bright, nothing's too dark. And even the best cameras, you can have, $1,000 camera, $2,000. It's still not going to do great with contrast. So we can take a look at some lighting. So again, this was first thing in the morning. You kind of see a little bit of glow in the mountains, more shadows, just more depth to it overall. Same thing. This is actually a high contrast, which again, the more you're out, the more you're going to kind of be able to play with these. You have the very bright sky compared to the very dark forest. Gives just a good mood to it. Gives it, again, a little more texture, a little more feeling to it. And with lighting, you could also use weather to your advantage. So for this example, it was a sunny day, and then a lot of bright snow came in, which changed the color temperature, which we'll see in a second, as well as just how the light bounces off everything. So just really pay attention to what's around you, what's happening, and you can use that to your advantage. Same deal with this. If it was just a regular, clear, blue, sunny day, it'd be a fine picture, but this one you can really feel kind of the storm, the environment up there in the mountains. Again, compared to this one, perfect day, great to be outside, middle of summer. This was in July, but just very flat compared to this one. And this one, just more shadow, more depth to it. Just very flat. Like I said, it's a good picture, but more lighting, more shadows definitely helps make it a little bit more engaging. Same with this one too. And this is how you can kind of use artificial light to really, get what you want. So this was for the Polar Express up in Golden, and he is a hobo who rides the trains. And he didn't want his face to be seen. He's kind of wanted to be hid in the corner. So you see he's got this nice big bright spotlight on his head. And you can also use your subject to manipulate the light too, have his head down. So this is a really good example of how you can use natural light to kind of play with the mood and just really get what you want between your subject and the lights. And then all light has a color. It's called the Kelvin scale, and you can see at the top, sunrise, sunset, where it's very bright orange, 2,000, up to clear blue sky, could be 10,000. So there's this big range, and it's nothing you have to memorize now, but download a chart like this, kind of keep it handy. Auto white balance is good a lot of the time. If you're outside and auto white balance is great when your conditions are consistent. So like in here, the lights aren't changing. Outside, if it's a clear blue day, the lights are not changing. But if light changes, if clouds come in, your pictures are going to be a little touch different color every time. So if you're shooting an event or something, you might get a really blue picture on one, a really orangey picture on the other. And this is fixable in Lightroom, but it's just going to be more work usually. And we'll switch over to the camera and we can just see the Kelvin in action. So right now we're at 4,000, which is roughly to where these overhead studio lights are. But then going down, so the lower number you get is called cool, which you could see it turns to blue, which is why it's cool. And then you get back up and up and up, and you're going to get warmer and warmer. And you can generally see on your screen white balance doesn't have to be exactly perfect. It's pretty easy to fix it in post. Again, it's more work. And again, in your environment, the more you shoot, whatever you want to shoot in, whether it's portraits, outside, anything, you're going to kind of know your white balance range and just be able to set it pretty much automatically, autopilot, just like using the rule of thirds, leading lines, things like that. It's just going to get second nature the more you do it. So yeah, just with auto white balance, just make sure you don't kind of mix your light sources. That's really the big thing. And next, we're going to take a look at lenses. So there's 3 types of lenses generally: wide angle, telephoto, prime, and zoom. So I guess 4. So each camera, to start, it's going to have a different mount. So this Sony has what's called an E-mount. Canon, Nikon, every other brand, Panasonic, they're all going to have their own lens mount. And technically, you can use a Canon lens on a Sony body, vice versa. You need an adapter, but not everything might not work. Your autofocus might not work either as quick or as well. So most photographers, if they start Canon, again, they're going to keep those lenses for their life. They're going to keep those Canon lenses, keep Canon bodies generally throughout their whole photography career. And that's just some education. Cameras have different pros and cons. I like Sony because they're good with video and still photography. But again, it's totally preference. And at the end, we'll talk about what makes a good picture, and it's really not the camera. And lenses are measured in millimeters. So about 50 millimeters is about the human vision. So that's kind of your rough starting point, as if you want to know kind of just if a lens is a zoom lens or if it's a very wide lens. 50 is roughly about human vision. So this is a telephoto lens or a zoom lens. And so this is 70 millimeters all the way up to 300. So I can either take pictures of mountains that are far away, get them really up close, or like I mentioned, pictures of a bug on a leaf. I can really get in. I would have to be very careful with my zoom and get really nice big pictures of bugs. The one that's on here, this is kind of my daily driver, 28 to 75. Like I said, it covers about the human vision. It's got a pretty good range on it, but it's a good medium lens, for things that are between 20 to 50 feet. And then if it's bigger, I still have a wide range. So all these pictures you were seeing, I took off this lens. It just gives you a good range without being too extreme on this end. Or if you're getting an 18 millimeter lens, a little bit lower, that's going to be super wide. So I can get, if I'm on a super wide lens, I might be able to get this whole room. There we go, in one shot compared to just getting this little tiny bit. And again, that's what you're going to want to shoot. There's no pros and cons really to the exact millimeter lens. It's just what do you want to shoot? What do you want your picture to look like? And the zoom will affect what your picture looks like, which we'll also take a look at in just a minute. Just make sure I put everything. And then there's prime lenses, which are not going to zoom. They're just going to be fixed at one focal length. And the focal length is your millimeters, 70 up to 300, whatever. That's called your focal length as well. Primes are going to be generally sharper than any zoom lenses, but they're also going to be much more expensive. So again, it's that give and take. I'd like to start with zoom lenses so you can kind of see what focal length you're shooting at. And you can kind of go in again in Lightroom, take a look at all that, and then get a prime lens, 50, 75, whatever you're shooting at. So focal length is going to affect depth of field. And that is how much is in focus at one time. So for this example, you could kind of see the more you zoom in, the more the background is going to kind of get compressed and look like the background is right at his back compared to that first picture, super wide. You can kind of see a little bit more depth. It's also going to kind of change the shape of your face just based on how the lens works. We don't need to get into the exact science, but you can kind of see, he almost looks like a totally different person between a wide angle and a telephoto lens. And then the middle one, again, probably roughly 50 millimeters or so, which is what our human eye is going to see. So the lens will just naturally distort just how things look. And again, that's something to play around with. If you want a certain look, it's good. You can kind of push the camera right up into someone's face, or you can have it go far back and zoom way in and get that very blurry, background like on the telephoto. You can switch back to camera, and we can kind of get some real world example of how zooming will affect what's in focus. So I'm just going to line some things up here. And go there. So the more I'm zoomed in, the more sensitive the focus is going to be. And you can only zoom in so far until the lens just cannot focus. It just doesn't have enough room. So you could see this lens cap here. I don't have enough room. So that means I'm going to back the camera up or move the stuff back. But we can use this one as an example. So I'm all the way zoomed in at 75 millimeters, and that's why it takes a little bit longer to get your focus. And you can also see, again, the batteries back there are not quite in focus. So my focal plane, the more I zoom in, is going to kind of shorten up, and it's going to compress the background and get it a little bit closer, a little more blurry, compared to if I'm out all the way. Again, you kind of see more in focus. And then if I push in, and I'm not zooming in, I'm actually physically moving the camera now, I'm still able to get a little bit closer and have those a little bit more in focus compared to if I had just zoomed in. And again, that's just practice of what do you want to see? How do you want it to look? Do you want to move your camera in focus? Do you want to zoom in, have that really super compressed background, have the camera all the way out, your focus all the way to infinity, which is a lot of times how it would take landscape pictures zoomed all the way out, and that's how you get all that stuff in focus. So again, it's just a lot of practice, a lot of trial and error. It's not like we're shooting on film anymore generally. Take a lot of pictures, play around with it, and that's really the only way you're going to kind of find out what you want to do. But knowing what these effects are and why, and how to change them is going to give you a good first start. And then you can see this mostly famous shot from Jaws. And so they're zooming in and they're moving the camera in and zooming out at the same time. This is a good example of how much the lens can really distort the background and change what you see. So you can kind of see the whole background morphing in real time. You see it's very short focus compared to moving. It get a little more focus in it, a lot more background, and you can even see the distortion as he's kind of zooming out. It just kind of looks, it's a great shot, but it just looks a little weird just based on the lens distortion. So just something to keep in mind. And then finally, just how to take a good picture. And a good picture is going to be a combination of the science, which is the exposure, the shutter speed, ISO, focus, how much you're zooming in on your lens, learning all of that, and then combined with the art of composition. And again, since it's art, you learn the rules first, and then you kind of learn how to break them. But once you learn and master the exposure, shutter speed, you can really get into composition and just focus on getting good pictures. And like I said, you're not shooting on film anymore. So take a lot of pictures. And composition really is what's going to separate a good photographer from just someone taking pictures. Again, your phone will automatically set exposure. A good photographer will take a good picture on a camera or point and shoot, anything like that. But someone who doesn't know composition, any camera they work with, their picture is going to look like, just someone like your mom took the picture at a birthday party or something. And it's kind of like music, a good musician can play on a cheap guitar. You can also take good pictures on cheap cameras. You don't need to go out and get good gear right away. DCM has cameras you can rent out if you want to. Go learn this, figure out what you want, what kind of camera you like. You don't need good gear to take good pictures. And that's really kind of the key. Just learn the composition, learn how to get a good picture. Shoot a lot, and don't expect not all of them are going to be winners. In any particular time, if I'm out hiking like I was this day, I probably took 200 pictures and came out with maybe 20 that I really liked, and that's okay. If I get one, that's really good. One good picture is better than none. And again, a lot of it is trial and error, figuring out what you want, figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work, and a lot of times the mistakes are what's going to make you a good photographer, is learning from those mistakes. And then get feedback. There's a lot of places online, obviously a lot of people at TCM. Get feedback, see what works for other people. What you think might be good, other people might have some notes on. What you think might be just meh, might be really good and worth sharing out to everyone. So just get a lot of ideas, get a lot of bounce back, talk to people, listen, and just keep taking pictures. And Lightroom and editing are a huge part as well. They can make or break a picture too. They could turn a picture that's just okay. In about 5-10 minutes, you could turn it into really something totally different. And if there's interest, I do a lot of Lightroom too. We can always kind of dip into Lightroom and see how that can affect a picture as well. And that's about it. So like I said, just get out there, shoot a lot, experiment, play with your settings, find out what works. Take a tripod with you if you want. Get the slow shutter speeds, do quick, play with focus, everything, and just keep shooting. And you'll find what works for you. And if there's any questions, shoot us an email, stop by, and we're always happy to show you around. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you soon.